What's going on, everybody out there? Welcome to episode 3 here on the Rue Morgue 200 challenge. I am your co-host, Moodz, and of course I got the homie JP in the house. What's going on, brother?
Yo, I'm back. We're back. Time to review another third one in, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, the way I look at it, though, there's only 197 more to go. You know, it's really not that far of a stretch.
Right. 197. It's crazy. I have a list on Letterboxd of all the titles, and I decided that I was gonna put it onto a spreadsheet and print it out so I could like mark them off as I do them, because for some reason printing on Letterboxd, it comes out all wonky and stuff like that.
Right.
And so like I started filling it out, and I'm like, I got like 25 in, and I was like, damn, this is a lot of movies. But as I'm going through the list too, I'm just like, oh yeah, I forgot this one was on there. Like, right. A movie I never heard of, like some old 1956 movie or something. And I was like, oh yeah, I keep forgetting there's like a bunch of stuff on here that like I have no idea what it even is, even though there's stuff like Psycho 2 as well.
Right.
It's really fun. And this film tonight is actually a film that I had heard about for a really long time, but I've never seen. Although I have seen the director's 2 of his other films.
Yeah, and which ones have you seen? You've seen
Whirlpool and Symptoms.
Oh yeah, Whirlpool. Yeah, that's right, because that was in prep for the 1970 show. Yeah, that's Jose
right.
Ramon Larez's first film that he did, and that's actually a really, really good one. It's got a good ending, you know. But yeah, no, he's kind of an interesting director. It's almost like he had 2 different types of careers. His early part of his career seemed to be more convincing as a like a serious type of filmmaker. You know, his films were a little bit different. They weren't as polished, a little bit more grindhousey, but you know, they seem to be just a lot better in quality, right? Like with Whirlpool, and The House Advantage is a little bit more grindhousey, but Symptoms is like a pretty bona fide type of psychological thriller, like really, really well made. And then you got Vampyres, and then you go into the 80s and stuff, like with Stigma, which I've actually never seen. I've heard it's okay. And then Black Candles, which is notorious for having this ridiculous goat scene where a chick fucks a goat and shit, which is I've seen it before. And then you got the end of his career, which is like where he kind of conformed to American style filmmaking, and he made Rest in Pieces and Edge of Axe and Deadly Manor like all in a row, and they were like,
oh, I've actually seen Edge of Axe. I actually seen Edge of Axe on the big screen last year, and it was awesome. It was that was such a fun movie to see. I think it was like the last movie too, so it was like real late, and I think Carly fell asleep, so it was just me sitting up watching it in the car. But it was that one's actually super entertaining little slasher.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, you know, his later films, like I said, they're very much like American type slashers or whatever he's doing. Like, you haven't seen Rest in Pieces, but it's, you know, it's very kind of, it is what it is. But Edge of the Axe and Deadly Manor are pretty much slasher films kind of thing. But those films are just so low brow compared to his earlier work, just totally different. It's like he had these 2 separate careers, man. I haven't seen a lot of the mid kind of level stuff, because I mean, The Coming to Sin, I believe, is also in that box set under a different title. I think that's the one. It's the one in the box that I haven't seen yet. But I always laugh at this guy's career, because it just seems like it's like 2 different eras of, well, it kind of is like early 70s to late 80s, but it's very interesting with the films. But I've seen a lot of his movies, and I you know, for everything I've watched, I've actually really enjoyed. So, but yeah, that was the question I was going to ask you, if you'd ever seen Vampyres before, and I guess obviously you have not seen it.
No, so this is the first film that we covered that I haven't seen.
Right.
I think based on like my Letterboxd, I didn't go through and like mark off ones that I hadn't logged like earlier in my life on Letterboxd, but I believe I had seen almost exactly half, so 100 out of the 200. So it should be like, you know, here it should be like 50% that it'll be first time watches for me. I know it's far less for you, but there are at least some that you haven't seen.
Yeah, there is some. I think I had counted. Fuck, man, what was it? It was like I mean, there was a bunch I still had to pick up, and a couple of those I'd seen. I think it was roughly maybe 20 or 22 I hadn't seen. Maybe 20. Because like I said, there was a couple that I picked up recently that I had seen before. Like The Vanishing I just grabbed, which I love that movie from 1988. But I never picked it up because it's Criterion. And when you live in Canada, Criterion's is like, you got to trade for kidneys and, other organs and shit. Because we don't get those awesome 50% off sales here, where we kind of do, but then, we could indulge in those sales, but then it just works out to be full fucking price anyways. It's totally not worth it.
Do you guys have Barnes and Nobles up there?
I think so. I just don't have one near me. I think we have them, actually. I'm pretty sure we do. But I'm not 100%.
Because usually when they have the sales, like inside the brick and mortar Barnes and Nobles,
right, they're
all 50% off too.
Right.
But yeah, I was actually at a Barnes & Noble fairly recently, and I was looking at Criterions, and I was like, man, I really haven't bought many Criterions, and now there's like a bunch of ones that I like want. So I might have to partake in the next like half off sale.
Right. And actually, I did grab another Criterion also from the list that I didn't own, which was Hitchcock's The Lodger, which is actually a silent film from 1927, I believe. And I've seen it before. I had like a shitty copy of it before, so I was happy to, just basically have a reason to pick up the Criterion kind of thing, right? And so yeah, that was another one. But it's been a long time since I've seen it. I really don't remember it a whole lot, so that'll be an interesting one, because I think it might be the only there's two silent films I think in this Rue Morgue challenge.
Vampyre is silent.
Yeah, Vampyre, and I think those are the only two in the Lodger. So yeah. But yeah, so the film in question for tonight is, of course, Jose Ramon Lara's 1974 film titled Vampyres, however you want to say it. It's up for debate. Vampyres, yeah. So this is the newly released Blu-ray from Arrow, which is part of that box set. So this movie has had a couple different releases in Region 1 also. It was originally released by Anchor Bay on DVD. And for the people out there that have that DVD that don't have any other copies, I just want to let you know that the original Anchor Bay DVD says that it's fully uncut. And when they released it, they thought it was fully uncut. And unfortunately, it's missing about 30 seconds of footage. And and then of course William Lustig, who owned Anchor Bay and then started at Blue Underground, re-released it on this DVD, which is Blue Underground also released it on Blu-ray too. But anyways, right. It's the same version, but it is fully uncut. So if you have the Blue Underground Blu-ray or DVD, it'll be the same version of this, but this is a new transfer from Arrow. Just to let you know.
Yeah, I had thought I owned that Blue Underground Blu-ray, but I don't think I ended up picking up either that or it's like in a weird spot that's not in order. But yeah, so there was two versions of this box set from Arrow. There's, as you can see, like the Moodz disc is a little thicker. Yeah. These are the slimmer cases. And so there's this is sort of the standard edition that they put out after the version that he has, which is the collector's edition. But I will say, even this version is like kind of pricey now. Really? The version that you have is like up to like $180 or something, and then this one was like almost $70 itself. So
shit, man, that's crazy.
I'm not sure if this is going out. When was this released?
It came out. Rosset came out last year, maybe late. I'm pretty sure it was 2021. Maybe it was 20. I'm not sure.
I see. But either way, pretty good little box set there from Arrow.
Yeah, right. Sorry, dogs are driving me nuts because I'm home alone right now.
Yeah, that's all right. But yeah, this box set, if I would recommend grabbing it if you could find it on one of their sales or something. Right. Whirlpool's a good film too. I haven't seen the other one on there, but nice. I like when they do those like director sets. They're always like fun because you kind of get a little sample of the director's work. Yeah,
like he's gotten a lot of love actually, man, because Arrow put out that box set and they also put out a couple of the later slasher films, and then Vinegar Syndrome dropped.
Edge of Axe and Deadly Manor, I believe.
Yeah, and then Rest in Pieces was put out by Vinegar Syndrome, and Black Campbell's was re-released by Severin recently but it was originally released by Code Red. So, his movies have gotten, quite a bit of love, over the last few years and stuff, which is pretty cool. Stuff. So
that is cool.
So I guess we'll get into a quick little synopsis of Vampyres from 1974. Two mysterious women lure various passerbys to the rural mansion in England, in the English countryside, and hold them captive in order to feed on them to satisfy their insatiable thirst for blood. So, what are your thoughts after your first time watch on Vampyres or Vampyres? I'm just going to do that every time.
The very first thing I think about after like watching this movie is that like it's a very simple movie, but it's effective. Like the story is so simple. It's just like these two girls who are living in this like dilapidated mansion, and they're just bringing they're like lesbians, and they're or bisexual, I guess, and they're bringing guys into their place, and it kind of reminded me of Julia from Hellraiser, bringing people back to the apartment and killing them and letting Frank feast on the blood and whatnot. But yeah, and then there's like the, I guess, voyeuristic aspect with the people that are like parked nearby, like camping nearby, who the it's very nebby woman who's like super invested in what's going on over here.
Right. I always thought that kind of subplot with the campers was kind of a strange idea, because like, you're obviously traveling through kind of rural English, the countryside and stuff, and you decide to park your trailer like basically on the front lawn of a huge castle. Like, it's right like, in front of the place.
You would think, like, the people who own the castle would be like, you can't park on my property.
Right. Like, why would you ever think that was going to be allowed to do that? It just so happens that, no one comes out and says, get the fuck off my property. But they're literally right in front of the huge mansion, I guess, castle, whatever you want to call it. It's more of like a castle type deal. In fact, actually, that actual property has been used in so many Hammer films. Like, I just so many different, probably a bunch of Dracula films too, but the exterior shots, I don't think they shot inside, which I believe is actually now like a huge hotel. They've actually converted it, because it was actually somebody's house before, and now it's been converted into a hotel. But yeah, the outside exterior shots have been used in so many damn movies. It's ridiculous, but it makes sense because this is England, Hammer horror. Right. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful landscape, like the whole area. And it's funny too, because there's a couple shots of the mansion or castle or whatever, and you can see the clock tower in the background, which you recognize that from tons of Hammer films too. Like, they've even shown that in there too. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
It reminded me a lot of like Jean Rollin film. You know what I mean?
And you know why it does?
It had that vibe.
You know why it does? Because England is like naturally gloomy, because the sun doesn't really shine a lot there. Right. So you have this like natural atmosphere, and it fits the tone of the film perfect because the sun's never out. So you automatically are just lucking out with this atmosphere and this in within the setting, right? Because
it's like permanent overcast.
It really is. It really is. And like the score accentuates the cinematography so well, because it's such a mood score. And like visually, the movie is like, it's so doom and gloom in tone, but then visually it's just naturally like that. The landscape is freaking beautiful. It's amazingly shot. Like, there's so many good transition shots. And again, shooting in England, if you want to make an atmospheric film, Jean Rollin didn't shoot in England. He shot mostly in, the coast of, and mostly his movies were pretty much shot on the same fucking beach. Like, he was notorious for shooting in literally the same locations, man. It was, I swear he would shoot hours of footage and just hack it up for each movie that he produced, man. I swear to God he would do that. But yeah, like, he had, very similar in kind of location, not with the water and stuff, but you know what I mean? Like, just grabbing that tone. But I know what you mean though, like, very atmospheric, kind of gloom and doomy type feel, and the tone of the film is fantastic. But
not to mention, like, lesbian vampires are always enjoyable to me.
Well, I'd say bisexual, man, because they obviously have a
I keep
sexual
saying lesbian because it's like sort of a known subgenre, like lesbian vampires, but most of the time they were bisexual.
Right. Yeah, I love that about this, man, because they really don't shy away from it. It's very exploitive in the sexual aspect of the movie. And I love that too, man, because it makes sense. Because if you look at like, you know, vampire mythology, man, vampires are very sexual creatures, and it makes sense for, you know, vampires to be bisexual. I mean, it's just the way I see that as being completely normal, right? Women, men, doesn't really matter. It's just their nature when, you know, you're a vampire, right? So I think they do a good job with that. And I love the cast too. Like the two leads in the film just look the part. They totally do.
Oh yeah.
It's funny too, because the one character, what's her name? Is it Maria?
Fran is like sort of the more leader one.
Yeah, Fran. And then what's the blonde's name?
Miriam.
Miriam, man. She doesn't even have a line until like 3/4 of the way through the film. Like, you know, for most of the film, you think that she's like a silent character because she's there, right? She's there, but she doesn't really say anything until like more than halfway through the film. And then she does have a bunch of dialogue and stuff, but it's kind of funny that she just doesn't have anything written for her. But yeah, no, you are right, though. You are right. The movie is very simple in narrative. It's literally about two bisexual vampires that are just flagging people down on this countryside road. And it's so easy for them because really, who's not stopping for them? Like, they've got it made. Yeah. They've got it made. But my question is, where the fuck is all these people heading to? You know, like, where's everyone heading to? It's like they're in the middle, and they even talk about that in the film, too. It's like they're in the middle of nowhere. So there's 100%. A lot of traffic. There's a lot of traffic for being in the middle of nowhere. And I think it's pretty funny, actually, because I don't know if they ever disclose it in the film, but what's the main guy's name?
What the hell was his name?
Is it Ted? Is it Ted the main guy's? I'm so bad with some of the names in there. But you know, the guy that that Fran takes in and, you know, kind of.
Yeah, it's Ted. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Ted.
They kind of keep him alive.
Yeah. Well, they basically use
everybody else there.
Yeah, they use him as they basically use him as a food source. So they keep Ted alive. But my question is that, okay, so he's traveling obviously somewhere when he picks up the girls, or picks up Fran, I should say, because Marion's not with him.
Picks up Fran, yeah.
Yeah, so when he picks up Fran, he's traveling somewhere, but when he wakes up the next day, like, he's not fully, you know, he's not
It seems as if he's, like, disoriented, like, maybe because loss of blood, I don't really know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a combination of having your blood sucked out of you and also drinking a lot of that wine, because the wine kind of was the catalyst, and it was kind of like the nectar that really set the stage for what they were going to do. They would just feed these guys wine,
get them really drunk. Yeah.
It was almost like a syrup to them. They fill them up with the syrup and then we'll suck it out of them. Yeah.
If you are, that's why they tell you, like, don't drink after you donate blood or whatever, because your blood's really thin, and you know, alcohol is going to perpetuate you're going to get way more drunk. Right. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. He would be a little disoriented. But it's kind of, I guess it's not the worst life ever, right? I mean, you get to hook up with these two chicks and they just drink your blood every night.
but my question is, like, Ted had a destination at one point. The night before, he had a destination. When he wakes up, even though he's incapacitated, and I feel like he's not being controlled, because, you know, in that vampire mythology, a lot of times, like, when you do bite somebody and they don't turn away, you can still control them, like, with your mind and stuff. Like, you know, there's always that kind of mythology within vampires and stuff. Or, you know, they can do some type of mind shit. But in this, it's not really established that they even bit him. Like, it could have been that they cut him open from the fucking bottle and just started sucking his blood out of his arm and stuff. I mean, that's kind of what they imply it really happens and stuff. But anyways, the point is, he wakes up the next morning. He is out of it and stuff, but he just decides he's going to stick around, because he does say that he's overly infatuated with Fran and stuff, but he never leaves. So obviously his destination wasn't that damn important, right?
Right.
I'm just like, it's so fucking bizarre, but nobody else really has the chance to continue on with or get to their destination, because they simply get dead every single time they come into the house, right? So, but yeah, I think I really like this movie. I like the sexual aspect of it. I think they do a really good job with it, and I really like how it's bloody and violent too. Like, some of the scenes are, like, especially towards the end. The scene in the car gets really nasty, and there's a really nasty bloody scene towards the end, like inside the house too, and shit like that. But
it's not overly gory, but there's a lot of blood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it works, because you just imagine that, like, they're just bleeding from different places, you know, and they're just they're being attacked. And the blood looks good. Like it looks violent.
Yeah.
It's like it makes it you think it's more violent than what you're actually seeing.
Right, exactly. And that's what I like about it too, because like there's a lot of, you know, especially from this era of filmmaking, you know, if you specifically want to mention Hammer horror films, like they're not overly that bloody or gory or anything, right? So this has kind of made it, you know, towards the end of like Hammer Dracula films, it actually was pretty much over at this time. But I mean, if you were to put it in that realm of vampire films and shit, this is definitely one of the more violent and bloody films that came out around that time for, you know, vampirism and shit. So
yeah, there is like a minor plot that they don't really explore too much, where you might get the sense that Fran is like falling for Ted a little bit, because Miriam basically tells her like, hey, you need to kill him, like I feel like you're getting too involved, but it doesn't really go too many places. Right.
But I mean, there's like one major thing in this movie that kind of, I guess, I mean, the ending of the movie is like such a good kind of twist in a sense that you can kind of really explain everything away due to the explanation, I guess, because like it's an interesting start to the film, because the very opening scene in the movie is our two main characters getting fucking blown away.
Yeah,
they're in a bed. They're in a bed having lesbian sex, and somebody walks in. It's a POV shot, and they just blow the shit out of them. And the movie starts. The credits roll. Like it's literally that, and you're like, "What the fuck just happened?"
Yeah. So is Vampyres like a ghost movie?
So that's the cool thing about the ending, because all the little things that happen throughout the movie kind of defy the normal vampire mythology, right? Like generally in vampire mythologies, like during the day, where are vampires? They're sleeping in a casket in the dark. Not necessarily in this movie. They're out during the day. There is moments where they're sleeping, but it is what it is. But there is times where they're picking people up during the day. They're outside. They're drinking wine, right? They're not necessarily doing, you know, they're not sucking blood from the necks, and they're not controlling people, like, you know, with that kind of that brain activity and stuff. Like there's a lot of little things throughout the film. You're going, it's very interesting, because let's face it, in mythology, vampire mythology, they generally don't eat or drink anything, right? Except for blood. That's their lifeline. So it's curious that they're drinking wine with their male meals, essentially. But when the reveal happens at the end, it kind of explains everything, because you're like, oh, well, that would explain why they're able to walk around outside in the daylight, and
it explains like what, like the beginning of the movie that you kind of forget about by that point.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because I bet you were probably thinking when we're watching this, because you know how much I hate when they show a clip of the ending as the forefront of a movie.
I thought that was the end. Yeah, I thought that was going to be the end of the movie.
And you're right, though. You do kind of forget about it. But the interesting thing about it is they don't even try to hide it either. It's not like they shoot it from a certain angle where you don't get to see Fran and Marion's face.
Yeah.
They totally are exposed, and you know that they die. But by the end of the film, by the time they have this reveal, you're like, oh, shit. Like, it changes the whole complexity of the film. And it's kind of cool how they really do reveal it. It's basically a realtor who's screaming at Ted because he's passed out in his car, and he looks like he's been drinking on the property and shit. And then he's kind of telling them, like, you know, I've had a hard time selling this property because, you know, years ago there was a couple women that were gunned down in this place, and the word got out, and nobody wants to buy the house because it has this stigma with it, right, kind of thing. And the way it's told, it's kind of off screen. Like, they're walking towards the house, and it's almost panning away from them. Like, you really got to pay attention and listen. I wonder how many people are just like, once the camera pans off, just don't really catch the whole thing, and they just kind of miss the whole point that it's
right.
A very unique twist, because essentially what we have here is it's a ghost vampire movie. Like, how many ghost vampire movies are ever made? Like, it's a really unique thing.
Not many, yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there was actually a scene that I want to point out where I think her name's Harriet. She's the person in the camper or whatever.
Painter. She's the painter.
Yeah, she goes into the house or whatever and down in the cellar, and in like the background there's like all these bodies that she doesn't notice. That's kind of fucking creepy.
Right.
Like these skeleton remains of
right.
previous victims.
One thing I did want to touch on, which I thought was kind of funny, is that the way they would dispose of the bodies, they would make it look like these dudes are getting into car accidents. I'm like, these cops must be thinking to themselves going, how the fuck is it possible to have a car accident here every single night? Like single car accidents, right? Because they're showing up going, another dead dude.
It's so true though, because like you just, and it's like this desolate road that nobody's on, and it's like, how the hell these guys keep wrecking?
And I'm thinking to myself going, okay, like where is their destination and how are they all dying in these single car accidents? Like it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And like some of the accidents are so brutal too. Like they fucked up some vehicles and they made the death scenes look pretty nasty and shit. I'm just like, wow, man, it's pretty crazy. Like there's a lot of death and violence in the movie without being like overly gory. It's just really bloody. It's kind of cool. And I like it too, man. Like I said, there's a lot of nudity in this film. There's a lot of tits. There's a lot of ass. There's a lot of muff, and it's exploitive in that aspect, but it doesn't come across as being like corny cheesy either, because it's vampirism. It's based like well, that we know is like ghost vampirism, but you know, like I said, if you take the mythology, it's very sexual. It's expected to be like that. You know, and I think it really does work, man. Yeah,
I do too. It's like I said, a very simple movie, but it also like doesn't overstay its welcome. It cruises by. It's a perfect movie for late at night with some atmosphere and some, you know, naked vampires and some blood. It's
right.
Honestly, like, it's like quintessential like 70s horror that isn't like The Exorcist or something, you know what I mean?
Right. And it's kind of cool because it stands a test of time, because like I rewatched it again today and I was like, I can't even think of like another, like just off I didn't really think about it too hard, but I was like, I can't really think of another like ghost vampire movie. Like weird, like ghost vampires isn't really explored much in like
ghost vampires.
And this one is one of those ones where it throws you the twist of that too, and it really does work because everything now is explained, right?
Right.
So it's not like one of those twists where you go, oh yeah, okay, fuck, they just decided to do something last minute in the script, but it's like it totally just makes sense. It's pretty cool. But yeah, man, like one of my favorite things about this film is this is why I love 70s cinema. And, you know, especially like Euro cinema and stuff like that, or just foreign cinema, because they managed to capture a lot of fucking atmosphere, man. Like I'm a huge visual person, but man, and great locations, great atmosphere, and you know, the great score and stuff. They just really hit the nail on the head in this film, man. All the right specs. So,
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. It's kind of, you know, I mean, it's a movie that I do hear the odd people talk about. I know I've heard Tom mention this, Horrors Ball, many times, because he's a huge 70s fan, but he always talks about this one, and he's like one of the only people I ever really hear mention this one, you know, in the light of being one of the greatest, you know, vampire films, you know, of that time, and you know, maybe even of all time. It's just, it's kind of unique. It's very unique.
Well, I mean, it seems very up his alley. Beautiful women. Atmosphere, a castle, like, you know, all the staple horror stuff that he seems to love.
Yeah, I mean, it is very 70s, man. Everything about it, even them pulling their little like 15-foot pole trailer with their car, that's something you never see anymore. Because like you could only pull one of those things with you couldn't even pull with a new age car because they're too light. The cars are too light, and like those old trailers were built with like hard walls and stuff, so they were a lot fucking heavier, but like those cars are just heavier and bigger, and it's such a 70s thing to see a car pulling a trailer. Like you just never
you don't see that
like I have a fucking truck, you know, for a reason of pulling shit. Like it's, you know, you just don't. It's pretty funny, but yeah. But yeah, I think one of my favorite shots in the film actually is one of the opening scenes where so our camping couple is driving down the road, and then this is when the wife gets like super paranoid about what she saw. Like he sees Fran on the side of the road, but he doesn't see Marion in the background, but she did. And like it's a great shot too, because the shot doesn't focus. She's in the shot purposely, but it's not a focus on her. But she's back here, and it's like just a really, really good kind of panning shot of her. And it's very creepy. I mean, you're just like, okay, something's up
creepy.
Here.
Yeah, and it gives the character a good like reason to think something's up, because that's kind of weird.
It is weird, because why would one person be standing on the road frantically trying to flag someone down? The other one's like standing off in the bush, kind of doing this, like, did you get him yet? It's totally that moment, right? And you're just like, okay, let's go. There is a very curious moment in the movie, when Fran touches her face. She meets her outside and she like touches her. You know that scene where she touches?
Yeah, she said. What did she say? She says something along the lines of like, "I knew it'd be you," or so. I can't remember. What the hell did she say?
She says something on the lines of, basically when she touches her forehead, she kind of like almost draws a cross in her forehead, and she's like, "Now I know it'll be you from now on," or something like, or I'll be able to see you from now on. And I'm like, and I'm thinking about that after the end of the movie. I'm like, because I thought. When I first saw this movie years ago, I can never explain this still, that it was her kind of marking her. But when you get the twist, it doesn't really make sense. I'm just saying, like, like vampires, when they can mind control people, the reason why they can is because they've not really put them under a spell, but they probably bit them and they haven't turned, but they can control them that way. But the thing is, she hadn't done anything to her except for touch her forehead, and I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing, right? It's like maybe she has this kind of power of, instead of in this mythology, instead of having to bite someone to take control over their mind, you can just touch their forehead, kind of thing. But it doesn't really play into it too much, because it's not like she ever does fully like control her in the film and stuff like that. But it's a very curious moment. I'm wondering if they were like had something else in mind with that and they just never rolled with it.
Yeah.
I don't really know, because it is one of those moments where it kind of sticks out going, well, that's interesting. Could just be there just to throw you right off too. I don't know, but it's curious.
Yeah. And honestly, I was a little surprised at like what ends up happening to that character too, Harriet. I didn't expect it to really go down that road.
No, it's a great twist.
Yeah.
So I do have it written down. It says, when she touches it, she says, with this sign, I will recognize you when I will recognize you. With this sign. So she does technically, I think she draws a cross in her forehead.
So she marks her.
But, and I mean, I guess they end up killing her too, though. So, but then they kill everybody,
kind of
really.
Weird.
I mean,
I wonder if there's a commentary on here.
There's a bunch of interviews. I've actually never watched it.
There is a commentary.
Yeah, there is commentaries, but there is a bunch of interviews. I wonder if that's ever. I mean, the commentary would probably be the best thing to locate an answer for that. But I always thought I still think that's the most curious part of the film, because, like I said, the twist and the outcome of the film is very interesting to what happens in that scene.
Yeah, that'll be. I'm curious too on that. I wonder if they mention it. But have you ever seen the remake of this?
Yeah, no, I said that. I think it was a couple 31 Days of Horror years ago. I reviewed this on 31 Days, and I did the remake the next day. And the reason why I had done this movie is because I believe I got the remake for review. So maybe it was like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know. It must have been a long time ago. But I think I got it for review, and I was like, well, perfect opportunity. I'm doing 31 Days. I might as well just do the original and then do the remake back to back kind of thing. And I remember the original or the remake. Like, I've only seen it once. I remember it being okay, very different. I believe there's no twist like that in the movie. I think they changed the ending. I think the whole thing is more or less it is sexual vampirism. But don't quote me on that. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and watch my review. But then again, I didn't spoil in that review either. So, I can't quite remember. I remember it not being bad though, but not great. Like not a shitty movie. But yeah, it's hard to like when you have a movie like this, and then to remake it like in such modern times, like you just really can't. I mean, you have to do something completely different than the original, because you got to be able to separate it, because you can't like duplicate this, right? You just can't duplicate something like this nowadays.
I think like a big thing that's like lost in modern cinema is like, back in the day, even in independent cinema, you could still get these amazing locations, and just today you just don't see castles and stuff in movies anymore. You know what I mean?
No, definitely not. Definitely. I mean, a lot of the old school locations, like in Romania and other places and stuff, like they're now like museums and hotels and shit, and it's probably just costs way too fucking much even to get a permit to even do the exterior shots on them and shit. They're just like, fuck, we got so many people around here, it's just not worth it. Plus, you got to go there. You got to actually do that shit. It's a little bit cheaper back in the day. So, but yeah, I don't really have much more.
I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, it's a very simple movie.
It really is. You know, it's just it's a great atmospheric kind of gothic type, mysterious, ghostly vampire film, sexually charged vampire film. You know, it's entertaining. And it's entertaining.
I do feel like this one like fits on the list pretty well too, because not a lot of people ever talk about this one. I feel
absolutely, yeah. I totally agree with it, man. I just feel it's like a lot of genre-long films that I feel like people have not seen and probably should. You know, like I always mention things like The Iron Rose and Grapes of Death, and you know, so on and so on. There's a lot of them, and I'm just like, you know, if you like these kind of Euro films, these style films and shit like that, like I feel like he's one of those directors that totally gets overlooked. I don't know if it's because his movies are, you know, they're subtitled. I have no idea.
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of it is just that like they weren't widely released for a long time, that as far as I know. And then once the Redemption really wasn't. I feel like Kino has grown so much since that Redemption line.
They literally got away from it because like they, you know, towards the last like maybe 10 releases on the Redemption line, those were so far in between, but they haven't released anything on that line in a couple years, like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a couple years now, but like I honestly think that line's done.
Yeah, and I think that Kino wasn't really as popular when that line was going on as they are now.
Yeah.
But like I've recently started picking up a lot of the titles on that Redemption line since they've been on sale.
Right. For
like $10 each, and it's just can't pass that up. But I grabbed a lot of Roland films as well. But that is a director that it's funny because me and Jeremy were like grown in it doing him on the show, and of course I ended up really liking him, and since then I've seen a couple more of his films, and I love him. I think he's an amazing, awesome director, super atmospheric, just very stylistic, like that Euro style that's
Oh, I know.
Enjoyable.
I always thought it was really funny about the genre-long thing is that, you know, I'd mentioned him a couple times. You know, I remember you guys were like flat out, fuck no, we're not doing this shit. I'm like, why?
Yeah,
like you might.
I don't want to do raw.
I'm like, you might like this shit, man. I'm like, it's not what you really think it is. And I actually don't even to this day know what you guys thought you were getting yourself into or what you didn't.
I don't know. I never heard of the director, like, and I just figured it. I don't know. I was just being annoying.
Yeah, I mean that could be. I mean, I've heard people say that like, oh, the shit's just too fucking, you know, it's too vampire sleazy fucking. I'm like, oh man, there's more to the movies than just that, man. I mean, come on. I mean, people you might even look at this movie and be like, oh, it's just psychosexual fucking violence, and I'm just like, oh my god, seriously. There's definitely a little bit more to it. But I mean, maybe not a whole lot more, but come on. It's entertaining. But that's what I like about it though. Like, you know, it's even acted well. Like the movie's acted well. It's got a small cast. I think everyone plays their parts really well. I like the Playboy guy that comes in and he's like, I love that scene. And that's another really, really curious scene in this film is when, fuck man, it's like, actually, this is the one I wanted to talk about. I just remembered right now. When the Playboy, I think he's labeled as a Playboy. I think he's one of the last kills. He comes in, he's a guy in the suit, and he's drinking the wine, and he's the expert. And he's like, oh yeah,
he's like these different wines,
and they're like, oh no, he's like, no, seriously, I can get this one. They're like, oh, and I bet you can't get what this is. And I'm like, okay, it's a curious conversation, because if it's really just wine, why wouldn't he be able to get it? Because he's like naming off some crazy shit. He's like, this Cab Sav, and this is a Malbec from this region, and this, it must be aged old. And they're like, yeah, no, it's definitely aged. You know, and I'm like, what the fuck is he drinking? Like, are they playing?
It made me wonder, is it blood? Like, is it like wine blood or something that they've been giving?
The thing that was curious about the scene is that, like, that bottle of wine that he's, like, we saw him pop that top. So unless they put the cork in, like, they'd put blood in there. But, like, if it was blood, he wouldn't be, like, relating to wine that much, right? Like, you know, it just, blood and wine, come on, man. I mean, visually it might be the same type of thing, but, like, it's not going to taste anywhere near that. So it's another really curious scene, because it does make sense though. Like, if you're a vampire that lives in a very rural area and you have to, like, kind of save your meals, if you drained out bodies, you might bottle them, like cork them.
Of course. Yeah.
Right?
Why not?
Right. But I mean, my point is that, like, if you're an expert wine drinker, you're going to know right away that shit ain't motherfucking wine. Right. Yes. But, like, when he says it's aged well, and they kind of smirk and go, yeah, it's definitely aged well. It's like, I'm like, oh man, this is some old man's blood. But, you know, it's curiosity really within the narrative. So, but cool things like that though. I mean, it doesn't have to be explained. At least they do a good job with the twist, and it does explain a lot of the other stuff. Right, if you're into, like, typical mythology, vampire mythology, with especially the sunlight thing, that's the thing that's really curious about the film right away, is because, like, they're out in the sunlight, and you're like, well, what the fuck? Like, most vampire movies, depending, like, almost all mythologies, with the exception of, what was Daylight, or there was one, Daybreakers, whatever, they could be out in the sun, they had sunglasses.
Yeah.
So that was
Blade.
And Blade, so they got they protect themselves from UV.
Vampire though,
right? He's half, and then it was Daybreakers. I think they wore the sunglasses or whatever the fuck. I have actually never really seen that movie, but I just know that there was a way to block the UV, and it killed him and stuff. But yeah, no, I always like to watch a film with different mythology. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
I did get a kick out of the Sultana bran flakes. It was like cornflakes, but it was called Sultana bran flakes from Kellogg's. And I was like, ew, that just sounds fucking... It's like some weird English fucking bran flakes. I was like, ew, gross.
Yeah, that does sound kind of nasty, man.
Yeah, man, it was fucking terrible. All right, do you want to get into ratings then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll go first.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, so yeah, I really dig this movie. I think that it's a simple movie, but it's very smooth. It flies by. Just good stuff all around. I really enjoyed it. I give it I guess I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10.
7.5 out of 10. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've watched this movie a lot, actually. And you know, it always holds up every time I watch it. I think the twist is fantastic. And I don't know, man. I just, it's really unique. It's very, very unique, and it definitely gets a lot of points for me like that. You know, I'm a big fan of the hyper sexual acts in the film, the violence, but mostly it's the cinematography and the atmosphere, but mixed in with the score. That's the type of shit that sets up everything. I mean, the movie could have been acted shitty, and I still would have been like totally overcome with satisfaction based on visuals. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's just one of those things, and that's one of my favorite things in the world. So, but great film. 8.5 for myself.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah. So, okay. So with that, the next thing that we need to do here is find out what we're going to be reviewing for episode 4. So,
yeah, let's see.
Again, we did not talk about what we do. If this is your first time watching, you're probably not still watching the review after 45 minutes, but we do this all random. The other 197 films are in the randomizer right now. I hit random, and then whatever film comes up will be episode 4. It's as simple as that. All right, let's hit random. What do we got here? We have The Lair of the White Worm.
Okay, I've never seen it. I do own it.
Yeah, that's Vestron dropped the Blu-ray of that, so yeah, it's been a minute since I've watched it. I've watched it a few times in my days. It has been a minute though. It's actually, I'm really kind of curious on your. I can't remember if I reviewed this when I did my 88 series. I might have reviewed it then too. It's definitely very Ken Russell.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Ken Russell's work, man, this movie definitely fits into his film. You've seen Gothic before, right? That was another movie that was released by Vestron.
That's the Mary Shelley thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's Ken Russell. Later Ken Russell. He of course did the Amazing Devils movie, which needs to be released fully uncut. And have you ever seen The Devils with Oliver Reed? Oh my God, Oliver Reed is like...
Yeah, I seen that couple years ago on Shudder.
Oh, dude, Oliver Reed was like a maniac, man. Like that guy is just a maniac in his day, dude. I love some of his performances, dude. It's just outstanding. But that's a crazy movie, like just crazy shit. But yeah, I've seen a bunch of Ken Russell stuff, but so that's interesting. So we're gonna take that to the 80s, right?
Yeah.
With the Lair of the White Worm. I always used to call this movie The Liar of the White Worm. And I'm like, that's not liar.
Yeah.
Fucking dummy. Oh, man. You know what the runner-up was this week? Was Black Death.
Black Death.
That was, I think it's from like 2010 or 2012 or something like that. It's the Sean Bean film. It's a good movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the more, or not 2012. So it was probably one of the newest films at the time this magazine came out. Maybe it's like 2000, maybe 2010 or something. I don't know. But yeah, Sean Bean. But cool stuff. All right, so that's going to be Lair of the White Worm for episode 4. So everybody out there following along, make sure you check it out. Leave your comments down below. Let us know what you guys think of vampires or vampires, however you want to say it. It doesn't really matter. And that's going to do it for episode 3. Guys, we'll check you probably, I don't know, the next one will be out soon, but I don't know. Maybe we'll try to get some of these done on different nights and stuff. We'll see.
Yep.
All right,
guys.
Awesome.
All right, we're out of here.
Peace. Deuces.